Hello, thank you for joining me again for one of our paintings. Today's project is going to be this cute little penguin watercolor. I had a request from my friend Mackenzie, so she wanted to do some penguins. So that's what we're going to do this evening. Some penguins, and it might look a little bit difficult, but trust me, it's really not that bad. So the first thing we're going to do is, you can see that this is a wet on wet technique for the bottom parts of the penguins. So I'm going to try and use some water that's a little bit gray. If you want to start with just water, that is an excellent idea. It's just that I want you to be able to see. Oh, my cat's got some hair on my desk here. I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to try and go with a gray color. So for the first one, this penguin here on the left hand side, I'd like you to make kind of like parentheses on either side. And we can make this guy kind of cute and cuddly and round. And then you just join the edge and then fill this in. And we're not going to put the head on just yet. And I'm going to leave a little bit of white in here. And then while this is still wet, I want to go back in with some darker gray. So you're just adding black to water. And then I just want you to touch that in there where this would be a wing. And so we're going to touch that in on either side, where the wings would be. And then we're going to have a little bit of darkness, or like a darker black, just down at the bottom here. Kind of let the watercolor just kind of play. You don't really need to try and direct it too much. And this wet on wet technique is what's going to give us that kind of really fluffy idea. So as I said, you can use just plain water, but if I use just plain water, you might not be able to see what I'm doing. So that's why I'm using this lighter gray. But you can definitely use the light gray too, because you're going to add color on top. Now this penguin guy is leaning over. So I start his shoulders about here, and I kind of just go around and not let that touch. And we'll clean that up in a bit. But he is a little bit taller. And you can see that this side is kind of the same. And then we just round out this bottom piece. And again, if there's something you don't like, just dry off your brush and then you can go back in and pick that up. And I just added just plain water to just dilute this just a bit. And then we're going to go back in again with some darker water, or darker black. And right where his wings would be, we want to make that darker. And it looks fuzzy because these are little baby penguins. Although they kind of look funny right now because they don't have heads. And at this time, I'm going to put a little shadow underneath here too, where they're standing, and kind of just give the idea of, you know, some shadows in the snow. It doesn't need to be perfect, just kind of playful, but we want to make sure that we're leaving some white for where the snow would be. If you want to have like a little bit of a mountain area at the back, you can do that too. If you want there to be a hill in the background. Okay, so I'm just going to bring that in there. Good, so that is the first part that we want to do. And we're going to put heads on right now. So again, start with just plain water or just a really light gray. And we're going to put this, and it's just a little, like their necks are kind of tucked in because they're babies and they're fuzzy. So we're just going to make a little circle around, just like that. I'm going to pick up a little bit of this water and smooth this out. So this part in here is going to need to stay white. So just be careful of that when you're going in. You want to leave that part white. And then we've got, you can take a little bit of a darker gray and just try to put the idea of where you want the beak to go. And then of course you can add this in the same way you did the body, right? Just let that bleed with the wet on wet technique, because that'll be the darker area that's around his face. And then his beak's going to be right here. So we don't want to do too much with that just yet, because that'll be part of the pen and ink portion of it. I just add a little bit of water there. So you can see that this will be the white part of his head there. Then this guy's kind of got his beak up here because he's giving a little kiss. So if you put the idea of the beak in first, then you can put the rest of his head on. And a nice circle that's kind of pointing this way. And again, we want to make sure that we keep that part white for our little baby penguins. Like that. So you have the idea of where that's going to be. And then, of course, we just want to let that dry. So I'm going to use the hair dryer after I just want a little bit of a darker one. This is kind of a nice painting because we're not doing a whole lot of color mixing. It's very monochromatic, meaning just one color, but lots of different shades or hues of that color, right? And I think this guy's head should be a little bit darker up here. I just really love this wet on wet. I love that this color is just going to play and just give us that feeling of their soft, fuzzy fur feathers. Okay, so now we're going to let that. So once we have our penguins dry, we're going to do the background, because the last step we're going to do in this one will be the pen and ink portion. So I'm just going to put water on the background, and I'm going to not actually touch these guys. I'm going to go around them because I want to do more wet on wet, which might be hard for you to see. I should have used some water that's a little bit dirtier for you to see what I'm doing. And then we're going to take some blue and just drop it in there. So you don't have to worry about brush strokes, because again, we're just using this wet on wet technique to get the idea of a sunny blue sky background. So that time I got a little bit more blue on there for, hopefully you can see. So, and again, this doesn't need to look exactly like mine. You can decide to do a different sky. You could do a sunset sky if you wanted to, using different colors. This is just, you know, the start off point here. I'm just trying to, but you shouldn't feel like you need to have this perfect picture that looks exactly like mine, because every artist is an individual. So we don't want to have that kind of pressure on ourselves. This should be something that you enjoy or that's fun doing. I do try and get a little bit darker around the subjects in the middle, right? And then a little bit lighter, like there's some clouds. And then I like to get just a little bit darker up in the corners. We want to have our eyes travel through the whole picture. I need to lift off some here because I'm going to put a little heart over top of these guys. So I'm going to lift off, just remember drawing off your brush on a piece of paper towel or something, and then you can just lift off that water. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just want to lift off an area where I know that that heart's going to go. And then I can go back and just darken up some areas. I like to have a point where your eye can enter the painting and then travel around to see everything. So I kind of like the edges to have a bit of a darkness to it, and then around the subject I like dropping in a little bit more of a strong pigment in there so that it can play. And if there's any part of this that you didn't, if you drop it somewhere and you don't like it, you can use the dried off paintbrush to pull stuff out. You could use some tissue to pull that color back out, or you can lift it with tissue paper. Oh, I just got a brush hair in there. So just try and get that out. There. But you can also just add water, right? And that will lighten it up too in areas. So I like the fact that it's not all the same color of blue. And I love the fact that we don't have to worry about what our brush strokes are looking like, because we're just letting that paint play, which I think is my favorite part of using watercolors, is just letting that paint play. Okay, just like that. I think I have some tissue here for those of you who are interested. I just scrunch it up and then you can lift some more paint off if you'd like. You certainly don't have to. Then I want to do this little heart above the two. So you can put this in there, and we're going to do some pen and ink after. So again, this does not need to be perfect. I don't want anybody thinking that it needs to be perfect. And if it bleeds, that's even better, because we're going to do some pen and ink around it, right? So I'm not even worried about this looking like a perfect heart. I'm just dropping red in there because I'm going to make that look that kind of effect where that you just paint around it. So now I need that to dry so we can go on to our next stage. So we're going to do the snow next, and we're going to do it a little bit differently. What I did this time was I started off with gray. So you'll need some water and black until you get a fairly dark gray, but not too dark, right? It's just the underlining tones. We're going to do some work on top of it. This is a nice gray, I think, if you can see. You can see that. And we'll tap that on. Just like that. Not too much. And then, so I'm going to dry that first. I know there's a lot of drying in this one. A lot of drying, which means, I guess, a lot of pausing for you and a lot of editing for me. So once we've done the gray snow, we're going to add white. And the white, because we're working on white paper, and that's what I'm kind of using for the snow, is just the whiteness of the paper down here. I want this to be pretty heavy with pigment. So lots of pigment for the white. And you can't control really where that's going to fall, but I kind of hope some of it falls onto the gray. It's a little bit hard for you to see, but there is some there. And you guessed it, we need this to dry. And now we're done with the watercolors. So I put them aside and tried to get a little bit closer on the painting so that you can see what I'm doing for the pen and ink. So you see we've left a bit of a horizon, which I'm just going to highlight a little bit. And then maybe I'll highlight a little bit of the snow. And I just sign it whenever I feel like there's a good place to sign it. Okay, so we're going to add some eyes. And we're just doing just the littlest bit of a curve right there. And this guy's eyes are a little bit further up and they're pointing this way because he's giving a kiss. And I want to go back in and give a little bit of detail now. So the same kind of squiggly lines that I usually do. We can pull out a wing there, and we can accent the head. And this is where I'm going to get kind of lots of scribbles because I want us to know that that's where his beak is. And I'm going to give him, because they're kind of sitting on their feet, let's give them some feet. There. Let's give this guy some feet too. Just kind of poking out from underneath. And we know that this is one of his wings. And again, the squiggly lines are nice because it is also giving that idea that it's very fluffy. Okay, and I want to do the heart too. Okay, so I just did a nice little heart. You see, I didn't try and fit it perfectly around. And there is one more thing that I really liked about when I did this one. I used a white gel pen, and I just kind of went back in and touched up the snowflakes, but I'm going to use watercolor this time. So a nice, really pigment strong white, and I'm just going to put a dot, just a little dot on these ones that are really gray. And I just kind of loved this because it gave a real texture to the snow because it had the gray underneath and then it had the white on top, and it just added another dimension. So if you have a gel pen, you could do that. Or once it's dry, you just go in and just add a little dot of white where the gray may have fallen. Even if it's a really light gray, you can still just add that on. And that's our little love penguins. You just carefully remove tape. If you find that your tape is sticking and ripping the paper underneath, you can use the hairdryer and just on a really low setting, just kind of heat this tape up again. And that makes all that sticky stuff get warm and easier to pull off. It really just kind of depends on the tape that you're using. But if you've got patience and good tape, it shouldn't tear your paper. It should behave. And as I think I've said before, how much I love the blue painter's tape. It just seems to give me the crisper lines. This one I got folded over. And very rarely does it actually rip the paper. And then I'm going to trim this up into that Polaroid shape that I'm enjoying so much right now. So the measurements are 10 centimeters across. So this is 10 centimeters by 11 centimeters is how big the whole piece is. And then you've got the larger portion at the bottom, just like the old Polaroids pictures did. And can't see what that line is. I must have drawn it way too light. And there you are. Thank you. So again, please like, subscribe, let me know, comments. And if you have anything that you'd like me to put together for you, I would love to hear from you. Thanks.